As you've got it from the title, today we shall decide if it's worth upgrading from the iPhone 12 Pro Max to either iPhone 15 Plus or iPhone 15 Pro Max. And initially I wasn't even sure if I want to do this video because everyone does them. You could see the titles: iPhone 15 Pro Max, 4 months later, iPhone 15 Pro Max, honest review, iPhone 15 Pro Max, not what I expected. You got the idea. But there are two major points here which I want to highlight. First of all, the tech community is mostly agreed on the fact that if you have an iPhone 11 Pro and below, it's time for an upgrade. And if you have an iPhone 13 Pro and above, you should hold. You're good for now. But there is no clear agreement on the iPhone 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max, which is right in the middle. And we do need clarity here. Because, and here goes the second point, I myself daily drive an iPhone 12 Pro Max. And I'm not sure if it's time to upgrade. So this video will help both you and me to decide what's next. It's Alex here, welcome to the Geeks Table, and let's get into it. First obvious question: why do we even bring the iPhone 15 Plus to this discussion? Well, if you're an iPhone 12 Pro Max owner, I guess you've bought it because of either the screen size, or a bigger battery, or because it had a different camera. Back then it had a longer zoom and a superior image stabilization. And the iPhone 15 Plus has the same screen size, it has a big battery, and it kinda has 3 lenses. Oh, and it's cheaper. Also, after having an iPhone 12 Pro Max for some time, you might be thinking, hey, I haven't been using all those pro features that I paid for. Maybe I should save some money next time. But the iPhone 15 Pro Max is a great candidate as well. The history repeats itself. iPhone 12 Pro Max had a longer zoom compared to the 12 Pro, and now iPhone 15 Pro Max has a longer zoom compared to the 15 Pro. And if you're that kind of person who wants it all and now, then this model is for you. All 3 models have a matte back, no more fingerprints on non-Pro models, thank God. And the size of the phones is almost the same, so you won't have to get used to a new grip. The iPhone 15 Plus feels a tad lighter in hand, after all it has only 2 rear lenses, but in general there are no dramatic difference here. All 3 phones have different materials on the sides, and thanks to the titanium and polished aluminum, the 15 series don't have those nasty finger marks. You may know already that instead of the mute switch, the iPhone 15 Pro Max has an action button now. By pressing and holding it, it allows you to do one of these actions. Is it a feature worth upgrading for? Let's look a bit closer. Because it supports shortcuts, we can actually create one to launch any app of our choice. I found it useful to launch an alternative camera app because I'm not always satisfied with the default one. You may say, but in order to launch a third-party app, the phone has to be unlocked. And you'll be right, but because the FaceID now works both in landscape and portrait orientations, I can pull the phone out of my pocket, press the action button, and while I'm moving the phone towards my face, it unlocks itself, and I'm ready to use the app. Let's try. So, just checking. Now I'm locking the phone. Now it's locked. And now, let's say I'm pulling it from the pocket and I'm pressing the action button, and it works. Just to be fair, on the 12 Pro Max or 15 Plus, we could use a widget to do the same thing. But we have to look at the screen in order to tap the right widget, and also it always requires at least 3 taps to make it work. First one is to light up the screen, the second tap is ignored, and only the third launches the app. Have a look. So I would say that a dedicated button is more convenient. If we open the notification center, we'll notice that the phones that have an action button have a mute icon instead of the screen mirroring. And also, once you mute the phone, you'll see this bell icon near the clock. I found it distracting, so I had to go to the settings, open the sounds and haptics, and pull the switch off to disable it. My biggest problem with the action button is actually a fun one. I always forget that it's there, because for years I ignored the mute switch, because usually I just put it to mute and then I forget about it like for the entire iPhone's lifetime. But now I have to remind myself that in this area there is something useful. So don't let it be the key selling point towards the iPhone 15 Pro Max, because maybe you won't even use it. Another external thing that's worth noting is the dynamic island. It's not new to the 15 series, but new to a 12 Pro Max owner. I can't say that the dynamic island changed or improved my day-to-day phone usage. It's just there, and in a couple of days you just stop noticing it. But if you're a fan of Johnny Ive's commercials, which are mostly white, or MKBHD, who for some reason does the videos in 21:9 aspect ratio, the cutout will be there, of course. But in most movies you'll just have it like this, so I wouldn't bother much. And if you find the animation around it to be distracting, you may just swipe it away and it will be gone. And while we are looking at the screen already, let's quickly talk about it. People all over the internet are screaming about the refresh rates. The iPhone 12 Pro Max and iPhone 15 Plus have a 60Hz refresh rate on the screen, while the iPhone 15 Pro Max can go up to 120. It results in the Pro model to have more smooth animations, scrolling and gaming experience, while the iPhone 15 Plus isn't any different from the iPhone 12 Pro Max. I should warn those considering to hold until the next iPhone comes out, because it might have a screen with a higher refresh rate. Personally, I wouldn't expect standard phones to have that technology. Maybe the 90Hz would be the highest, but I think it will be still 60. And the thing is that Apple calls this technology ProMotion, and nothing that has the word Pro in it comes to the non-Pro iPhone, like ProMotion, ProRAW, ProRes, A17 Pro. None of this is in the base model, so you have been warned. Another feature that is unique to the Pro models, at least for now, is the always-on display. You can still check the time and notifications while your phone is being locked. If you find it distracting, you can disable the background so it will be just black, or if you worry about your battery, you can disable the feature completely. It also has this nice standby mode, where you can put the phone on a MagSafe charger horizontally, and it will automatically turn into a watch stand, showing time, stocks, or other info, and occasionally bothering you with notifications. Not sure how useful this is, a bit distracting to me, but looks kinda cute at the desk. But sometimes we simply need a phone stand wherever we go. And would be great if it were light, portable, capable of holding some bank cards, and had different colors. MOFT produces foldable stands that would have you covered, and they check all these requests. Their latest snap-on stand has lots of colors and improved magnets. Here's the old generation, and here's the new one. I tried really hard. But my favorite stand is this one. They call it the invisible tripod. It elevates the phone above the surface, so you could have a better angle during the video calls, or you could put it perpendicular to the surface, so you could use it as a camera. For example, this one was shot on iPhone 15 Plus with the help of MOFT tripod stand. The links will be in the description, and by the way, it's time to talk about the camera. First of all, there are a few features that are exclusive to the Pro models, so if you need them, you have to go with a Pro. One of them is the ProRAW support. If you want to capture RAW photos out of the box, like 12 megapixel RAWs of the telephoto or ultra-wide, or 48 megapixels on the main camera, you have to go with the 15 Pro Max. But before you rush to the Apple Store, do check how often have you edited RAW photos on your current phone. Because this is what happens to me. I shoot RAW photos to edit them later, then I forget about them, and they still occupy my storage as RAW photos. And while a JPEG could be like 3 megabytes, a RAW photo on 15 Pro Max could be up to 100 megabytes per one photo. So think twice if you need this functionality. Similar thing with the ProRes videos. They are huge. If you don't plan to color grade them later, just forget that this feature exists. If you're interested in ProRes, I'll leave a link to the No Limits On channel where they compare different videos, encodings and color grading. Might be useful to watch. But if you're not a professional videographer, let's move on. If you're coming from the 12 Pro Max, you'll discover a new setting in the camera called Photographic Styles. It's not limited to the Pro models, so iPhone 15 Plus owners will have it as well, and I'd say it's Apple's way of handling the white balance and saturation. Have you ever noticed that iPhone's photos are too bright or too vibrant, or vice versa? Now you can apply the exact style if you're unhappy with what you see in the viewfinder. It may also be helpful if your photos are taken in a specific style. For example, all your Instagram feed is made in sepia or like high contrast or vivid, then these photographic styles will be helpful as well. Now let's have a look at the main cameras of the phones, and both iPhone 15 Plus and iPhone 15 Pro Max feature a 48 megapixel sensor, which is quite a spec bump compared to the iPhone 12 Pro Max. And thanks to the huge sensor, we can have a 2x button in the camera app without a need of having another lens. It simply crops the 48 megapixel image and makes it same 12 megapixel shot as you would have in 12 Pro Max. And here's the best part. If you look at the aperture, we'll notice that these cropped images are made with a bigger aperture compared to the 12 Pro Max telephoto. So they may actually be less noisy and of a better quality. As a downside, you'd notice that the 2x is not 2.5x, so you might feel that you're losing this extra zoom length. By the way, all three main cameras have different focal lengths. The iPhone 15 Plus has a bit wider angle than 12 Pro Max, while the 15 Pro Max has it even wider. It's not a big difference, but after upgrading to a new phone, you might notice that suddenly the photos look a bit wider than they used to be. Since we are talking about the focal length, the Pro models have this new feature. When clicking on the 1x button, it could slightly crop in, and your 24mm frame could become 28mm or even 35mm. I usually take photos first and reframe them later, so this feature looks a bit odd to me. But I know people who prefer framing at the time of the shot, so maybe this one will be useful for them. Sadly, Apple thinks that this feature is too professional, so it won't be available on 15 Plus. But okay, it's easy to get used to a wider focal length, but what's actually challenging and sometimes even infuriating is the minimal focal distance. You see, the iPhone 12 Pro Max and 15 Plus have it around 15 centimeters, so whatever is closer than 15 centimeters to the lens will be blurry. But iPhone 15 Pro Max has it even worse, it's only 20 centimeters. Let me show you what it means in real life. Here I've put an object on a 20 centimeter distance, and I'll be taking photo from this spot by all three phones. All three models were able to focus and make a good shot, and we even have a nice separation with the background, which looks nice and blurry. Now we move the object 5 centimeters closer and take another shot. And you can see that 12 Pro Max and 15 Plus still could focus normally, and we still have nice images with a good separation of the background. But that's not the case with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, because it had to switch to the ultra-wide lens to maintain the focus. If we force the phone to use the main camera, by clicking this button, then it will be blurry and will be the worst compared to the other two phones. So if you do close-up photos quite often, then do note that in terms of the minimal focus distance, the Pro model will be a downgrade. But if we just relax and enjoy our sunny day, then the photos of all three phones are very much alike. Whenever the scene is well lit, then even a 5-year-old sensor would be producing good-looking images. I mean, if you'd show any of these pictures, you could say that it's been shot on the iPhone 12 or iPhone 15 and no one would say a word. If we do pixel peeping though, then of course the white balance is slightly different across the pictures. I can't say that having different white balance is a big deal because they don't differ that much, and it's really easy to edit. And also, if we had only one photo instead of 3, we would be happy with any of these. At night, all main cameras also did great. Since iPhone 11 Pro, the main camera was capable of producing good night shots in general. Of course, if we would zoom in over here, we'll see that the iPhone 15 Pro Max has less noise. Which is as expected since the sensor is bigger and the aperture is faster. And if we would look at this photo, we could zoom in over here and we'll see that the 15 Plus and 15 Pro Max images look a bit sharper. Probably it's not a huge leap forward, but I'm happy to know that the photos are improving in quality. The question is, shall we zoom in the photos that often? But okay, let's switch to the ultra-wide lens now. Again, all three phones have it, but it's not quite the same across the board. When it's sunny, all three lenses perform great and I can barely see the difference. But actually, I've noticed that the iPhone 15 Plus and iPhone 15 Pro Max can be more sharp, but that's due to the image processing. And you know, for the ultra-wide lenses, that's a good thing to have. Sometimes we want a wider picture, and then later we wish to zoom in and check what's here and there, and it's better be looking sharp. During night, it's again the same question. Shall we zoom in the photos and how often we would do that? Because if we look at them like this, then there is no big difference. But if we zoom in, then 15 Pro Max is the winner here. The photos look much cleaner. Same story over here. The iPhone 15 Pro Max does it nice and clean, but once we zoom out, do we see a major difference? So the ultra-wide shooters who usually take photos during the day and don't really zoom in the photos, I think that you're probably happy with the 12 Pro Max, and the iPhone 15 Plus will be an insignificant but safe upgrade. And if you do ultra-wide shots at day and night and all kind of zooming and cropping, then the iPhone 15 Pro Max is the way to go. iPhone 12 Pro Max and the iPhone 15 Plus don't have autofocus in the ultra-wide lens, but we do have it in the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And because of that, it has a macro mode built in. I can agree with people saying it's like an extra lens in the phone, but it surely takes some skill and luck to use it. It works best when you have a full control over the camera, and it's usually on a tripod, and the subject stays still in the frame. But usually we hold the phone in our hands and we want to take a close-up of a leaf on a windy day, or an animal which never sits still, and then it becomes a challenge. On the contrary, if it's something stable, like some device or toy, then of course it will look amazing. So please, think twice if you really need this mode and if it's worth upgrading to the Pro model for it. And now it's time for the Telephoto Lens. Physically, it exists in the 12 Pro Max with the 64mm focal length and the 15 Pro Max with the 119mm focal length. If we also consider the digital zoom here, then we have 15 Plus with 50mm focal length and again 15 Pro Max with 48mm focal length. And before we jump into the 5x dimension, let's quickly compare the photos made by the 12 Pro Max Real Telephoto and the 15 Plus Digital Telephoto. Here we can observe this common pattern yet again. In normally lit environment, the photos look quite alike. And that's great news actually, because if you were thinking of moving to the 15 Plus, but didn't want to lose the telephoto capabilities, then you won't lose them. In fact, at night, the iPhone 15 Plus would produce better photo because the main sensor can capture more light compared to the iPhone 12 Pro Max. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have to admit that the 2x digital zoom in the iPhone 15 Plus and 15 Pro Max work better than the real zoom via the 2.5x lens in the 12 Pro Max. Okay, at this moment I could be fully convinced to go with the iPhone 15 Plus, but here the 5x lens comes in. And it's just amazing. Once you have it, you start thinking in different dimensions. New creative ideas come up, you can simply record something that you couldn't shoot before, like the landing of an airplane with all those nice little details, or animals which would run away if you'd come closer, or the flames of the bonfire, which may be dangerous to your eyes and clothes. This is really mind-blowing. Don't expect miracles in the low light, the pictures may get noisy, but in general, I'm amazed with this lens. Alright, I'm not into selfies, but I have to say a few words about the front-facing camera. The iPhone 12 Pro Max doesn't have an autofocus in the selfie camera, but both iPhone 15 Plus and the iPhone 15 Pro Max have. Basically, they both have the same module. And because of the autofocus, they can take multiple shots and stack them together. And you will get foreground and background in focus, like in this shot. And for the same reason, the HDR works better here. Notice how the background is completely washed out on the 12 Pro Max, but is visible on the 15 Pro Max. So if you're a selfie person, then the iPhone 15 Plus and the iPhone 15 Pro Max will improve your selfies for sure. As much as I don't like shooting selfies, I do like shooting portraits, or basically the photos with bokeh, or the separation of the background. And all of the three models produce great photos. This blurry background looks real, and I can't see a huge difference between the models. The iPhone 15 Pro Max can also do portraits with a 5x zoom, but you have to be like 10 to 15 steps away from the subject to take a good shot. I found myself not using the 5x portraits that often, but when it works, it works. Also, the latest models can turn the photos into portraits later. When you point at something, notice that this F sign is shown in the frame. It means that you may take a normal photo, but then go to the gallery and turn the portrait mode on. That's a useful feature because sometimes I tend to forget to turn it on, or I'm simply out of time in order to do so. One more thing you'll gain after upgrading from the 12 Pro Max is the portrait video. Apple called it cinematic mode. It's available in both 15 Plus and the 15 Pro Max up to 4K 30 or 4K 24. The best thing about this mode is that it's fully editable afterwards. During the shot, the portrait effect looks a bit too strong. So I usually go to the gallery and change it to something around f4, and then it looks less artificial in this case. The mode producing Slo-Mo videos is still here. No changes have been made so far. You still need a good light to shoot them, and they are still in Full HD and not 4K. Once we move to the video mode, then, well, iPhone will be shining more than any other phone on the market because so far it's still the leader. And even the iPhone 12 Pro Max videos look great now, but we still get some improvements with the latest generation. And one of them, which is not always talked about, is the zoom between the lenses. First of all, now it works in 4K 60, but also the transition itself looks more smooth and more natural. If we would take 12 Pro Max and we'll be shooting 4K 60 and then we would try to zoom, then we will see that we get digital crop and quite a choppy transition. That's why I rarely used it, or only in 4K 30 where it actually switches between the lenses. The iPhone 15 Plus, however, does the real zoom between the ultra-wide camera to the main one, and then the digital XX zoom within the main camera sensor. Same goes with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The transitions are also smooth, and you're getting a real zoom between all three lenses while shooting 4K 60. So now I'm switched from barely using this function to be a real fan and using it all the time. I should be honest with you, sometimes the lens switch is noticeable, but to me it looks soft and happens briefly. Honestly, I'm amazed by just the fact that we can do it now on a smartphone. At night, the lens transition is more visible, so keep that in mind and be careful with your footage. But in general, it's just mind-blowing, and I'm grateful to have such an amazing tool in the phone. Another improved video feature is the stabilization. Even on the 5x zoom on the iPhone 15 Pro Max is just great. The thing is that when you're shooting, in the viewfinder it might appear shaking, but in reality the algorithms would do their job and you'll get a nice smooth clip. I have a separate video where I compared the iPhone versus a gimbal, so feel free to watch it later, the link will be in the description. Finalizing the camera discussion, just so you know, moving from the iPhone 12 Pro Max will change your maximum zoom capabilities. I've never shot on this maximum because the image looks barely usable, but do note that it will be a slight decrease in reach with the iPhone 15 Plus and a dramatic increase with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now it's time for the battery test. I recently got the battery on my 12 Pro Max replaced, so the competition is fair here. All phones survived 11 hours of watching 4K videos on YouTube with the maximum screen brightness, and afterwards iPhone 12 Pro Max was able to shoot almost an hour of 4K 60 video, with other two phones doing it for 2.5 and 3 hours. That's a great result for all three models, and actually, if the battery is the only thing that you're unhappy with, then maybe just go to the service center and get it replaced. It will be definitely much cheaper than buying a new phone. Just use the official service for your safety. When it comes to charging the phones, the results are quite similar. Unfortunately, we didn't get a dramatic boost in charging speeds, even though the 15 series got USB-C. So we are still stuck with around 2 hours from 0 to 100. Now let's check the front-facing camera during the video calls. And here we are on a Zoom call with each other. So you can see 3 iPhone cameras and the MacBook Air, just for comparison. So this is the normal lighting condition. We're in the middle of the day and the window is not covered with any window blinds. And yeah, this is what you would probably see on a normal day, having these cameras on and optimized through the Zoom call. Now let me just close the window blinds so we would see how it works in a darker environment. So it got darker, and immediately we can see that the iPhone 12 Pro Max has the worst picture among others. So we definitely get an improvement if we upgrade to either iPhone 15 Plus or iPhone 15 Pro Max. And I would say that surprisingly, iPhone 15 Plus has a brighter image than the 15 Pro Max. So yeah, anyway, all the images are quite noisy, but yeah, you can live with it. So yeah, guys, what do you think? Write down in the comments and we will carry on. Okay, so here is the test of the 3 microphones. This is the iPhone 12 Pro Max. I'm speaking normally and the phone is on a hand distance. This is the iPhone 15 Plus and I'm speaking normally and the phone is on the hand distance. And this is 15 Pro Max and I'm speaking normally and it's on the hand distance. So they're actually standing at the desk, but well, they're on the normal distance, so as if I'm holding them. And let's say that we would like to record a dialogue. So now I'm on the opposite side of the table and let's see how the phones pick up the noise and the sound. If it's possible to record a dialogue using an iPhone or it's quite hard to, so the voice would sound unnatural. But I think it should sound nice because, well, iPhones are usually very good at recording sound. But yeah, it's a test. And speaking about the sensitivity, let me open the window, as I usually do during these microphone tests. Because it may be a bit noisy there is some traffic. And now I'm coming back to the phones, so I'm now in front of the phones again. And let's see how the phones pick up the noise from the street. So we have some traffic, some birds, yeah, so natural sounds of the city. So this is the 12 Pro Max, and this is how it handles the noise. This is 15 Plus, and this is how it handles the noise. And this is 15 Pro Max, and this is how it handles the noise. So these were the microphones, and finally the speakers test. And last, but definitely not least, the 15 series all got USB-C as their charging ports. But there are differences though. The iPhone 15 Plus features USB 2.0 speeds, while the iPhone 15 Pro Max has a special module in its fancy A17 Pro chip, which boosts the speeds up to USB 3.0. Since this module is part of the Pro chip and Apple doesn't give Pro features to standard models, I wouldn't expect the next standard iPhone to get speeds higher than USB 2.0. Also, the next Pro iPhone would unlikely to get the Thunderbolt speeds, and here is why. The other day I've been using the iPad Pro, which has a Thunderbolt port, and I connected the Thunderbolt SSD to it, and I was transferring some photos and videos between the iPad and the SSD. I did that like for 30 to 40 minutes, and I've noticed that the battery dropped from 80% to like 30. So luckily I had the Magic Keyboard attached, which has this extra USB-C port, so I was able to plug it in. But imagine the same situation with the iPhone, which battery is so tiny. That's why I think we won't see Thunderbolt coming to the iPhone anytime soon. And now some useful information for you. I've measured an average size of photos and videos this or that iPhone produces, and then checked the time needed to write or read them to or from the phone. I've tested two scenarios: transferring between an iPhone and a MacBook using Apple's own Thunderbolt cable, and doing the same between the iPhone and an external drive using the same cable. And of course I had to use the USB to Lightning adapter in the case of the 12 Pro Max. So if you're transferring a 100 of JPEG photos, you'll need this amount of seconds. Notice that the time differs depending on if we're transferring directly to the MacBook or to an external drive. Feel free to pause the video to check the results, but I'll move on. Now we look at 100 HEIC results, and notice that reading from an external drive on 12 Pro Max takes much longer. And that's one of the benefits having a USB-C over Lightning. It can pass more power to the connected devices. That's why reading from an external drive via USB-C on the iPhone 15 Plus takes less time than reading the same drive via Lightning. Now we're looking at transferring 100 JPEG Max files. Those are from 48 megapixel sensors from the iPhone 15 Plus and the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The files became bigger compared to the previous experiments, and I've noticed a strange behavior with the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the MacBook. Even though I used an Apple's official Thunderbolt cable, the transfer was done under USB 2.0 speeds. But when I used the same Apple's cable to connect an external drive, the speeds were as expected. And a similar thing happened when transferring HEIC Max files. Those are also exclusive to the 15 series, so the iPhone 12 Pro Max is missing here. And again, transferring to a MacBook took longer than transferring to an external drive. Finally, we got to the most heavy files, ProRAW, and here the iPhone 15 Plus is missing just because it cannot shoot ProRAW. But I've added additional tests for ProRAW Max photos. Geez, those names! So those are 48 megapixel ProRAW files that only iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max can produce. And in this case, we can see the benefits of the USB 3.0 speeds over 2.0. It's much faster. And for transferring videos, we get these results. I think by this time it's safe to say that if you transfer large files to and from your phone quite often, then you would benefit from having USB 3.0 speeds. And also, it's better to do the transfer to an external storage rather than to the laptop itself. And if you don't have an external drive or you are on the market to buy a new one, then check the video where I compared different SSDs. I hope you'll find one suiting your needs. The link will be in the description. Concluding this review, I recall my iPhone journey. It started with the iPhone 6 and then I upgraded to a new iPhone like every year. I had iPhone 6, 6S, 7 and 8, skipped the 10 and 10S because I didn't like the notch. But then I gave up and upgraded to the 11 Pro, and I remember this was such an excitement because everything felt like a huge leap forward compared with the iPhone 8. The screen, Face ID, 3 lenses, night mode, that was so good. But when I look at these phones with 3 years gap between them, unfortunately I'm failing to get the same excitement. Of course, the new phones have new features, but it's not that huge leap forward. So my verdict would be the following. If the only thing that you're unhappy with is the battery of your iPhone 12 Pro Max, just go to the Apple Store or any official repair center, check the price, it should be something around 100 euros, get the battery replaced with a new official one, and you'll be surprised how good your phone can be. If you feel a need of upgrading, but you kinda wanna save some money, and while using the iPhone 12 Pro Max you realized you haven't used a lot of Pro features, go with the iPhone 15 Plus. It will be a great experience, almost similar to what you have now. You won't lose in image quality and probably even gain some, and you won't notice that you're missing out. And if you have enough money to buy the iPhone 15 Pro Max, or you simply found a good deal, and you know exactly you'll be using those features that we talked about today, then go for it and you won't be disappointed. Trust me, I ended up buying one. As always, thanks for your time. Hit like and consider subscribing if this video was helpful. Feel free to leave a comment if you agree, disagree, or have any question. I'll try to check and answer it. And also check the links in the description about choosing the storage and about the iPhone stabilization. It's been Alex, and see you at the Geeks table. Bye bye!